He has to answer. He asking the same thing. You've had time to talk now. Must be nice.
Hold on to her. Have some fun. Whoa. I just died.
Oh, nothing like some good old fail videos, right? Like videos like that are strangely entertaining. They get millions and millions of views on the internet. That video is a week old. It has 10 million views on YouTube. And my family, we watch videos like that too. We did just this week, and we laugh and we laugh together. I don't know for sure all the psychological reasons those videos are so popular. One reason may be because the people in those videos often are trying to do something dumb, or they don't know what they're doing, and it's kind of satisfying to see people who do dumb things get what's coming to them, right? I'm not saying we want them to get seriously hurt or anything, but it's kind of fun to watch these videos and exclaim why would you do that? What were you thinking? What did you expect to happen? But the truth is, I've done plenty of dumb things myself, not necessarily those dumb things, but plenty of others, and I'm glad somebody's not been following me around with a video camera to post all of my dumb things on the internet. And because a lot of the dumb things that I do aren't nearly as funny. One dumb thing that I do sometimes is that I recognize an area in my life where I will need to grow, where I need to change to be a better follower of Jesus, a better pastor, a better husband, a better father, a better man, a healthier human being. I see the need for change, I understand it, and I want the change. And maybe I'll even try, kinda. But I don't actually take the steps necessary that will lead to the change. And that's just dumb. Because that means any change I experience is going to be minimal and or short-lived. Willpower alone generally isn't enough. At least it's not for me. And without a sustainable plan in place, not much change is actually going to happen. Followers of Jesus are called to become like Jesus. He loves us just as we are, but he loves us too much to leave us that way. He wants to transform us by the power of his Spirit to become more like him. Our memo verse of the month is 2 Corinthians 5:17, which says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here." Pretty good. Jesus wants to make us new, to learn to think and act and feel the way Jesus would if he were in our shoes, living our lives, to be filled with his love, his joy, his peace, and be all about obedience to the Father. And when we hear that, many well-intentioned followers of Jesus try really hard to be more like him. But true spiritual growth, true transformation, doesn't just happen, even if we try hard. For one thing, it's not us really who's producing the change. It's God's Spirit who produces the change in us. So it's really more about opening ourselves up to what he wants to do in us. But even that takes practice. It takes training, not just effort. And that's what we're talking about in this first teaching series of the year called Training Over Trying. If you were with us last week, you heard me explain how since ancient times, Christians have employed certain spiritual practices or spiritual disciplines as tools to help us become more like Jesus. A spiritual practice is any activity that can help us gain power to live life as Jesus taught and modeled it. Like, think of them as exercises that we could do to work out certain specific muscles. Like, if you've ever exercised at all, worked out at all, like some exercises focus on certain muscle groups, right? Those are what spiritual practices are. Areas of our lives where God shows us we need to grow. There are many possible spiritual practices out there, and like, we're not meant to try to see how many we can do at the same time or whatever. Many spiritual practices are meant to be done in a specific, limited amount of time. It's not something you're just supposed to do forever. And so how do you know which practices to do? Well, it's based on where you're struggling, where God shows you need to grow. Today, we're going to get real practical. We're going to talk about a few different practices that we can partake in to address a problem I think a lot of us have, if not all of us in some way. This problem has been described by many notable and respected Christian leaders and thinkers as the single greatest obstacle to spiritual growth for the modern Christian, at least in Western culture. And that is the problem of hurry. Now, what you expected me to say? I was surprised too when I first heard that. Dallas Willard, some of you may have heard of him. He passed away in 2013. He was a professor of philosophy at the University of Southern California, USC. And he was also a very devout Christian. He mentored many pastors and Christian leaders, especially in the area of spiritual growth, discipleship. He was very highly respected. And one of the pastors he mentored was named John Ortberg. And I guess they love to have their pictures taken in front of a bookshelf or whatever. It just must be their thing. But John Ortberg wrote a book that inspired a lot of what we're talking about in this series. John Ortberg tells the story of a phone call he once had with Dallas Willard. He had just moved, his family had just moved to a new city, a new ministry. And so after explaining to Dallas what was going on in his life and his ministry and his family, his own heart, John asked Dallas if he had any advice on how to be healthier spiritually. And there was a long pause. And then Dallas said this: "You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life." And John Ortberg says, he was like, okay, yep, that's a good one. All right, what else? What else you got? And Dallas Willard said, "There is nothing else." Wow. Dallas Willard apparently agreed with what Carl Jung wrote. You might have heard of Carl Jung. He was one of the most influential people ever in the field of psychology, but he also influenced literature and a whole bunch of other things. For example, he coined the terms introvert and extrovert. Maybe you've heard of that. He was also a Christian. Some people don't realize. He famously once wrote, "Hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil." And when I first heard that, I thought it seemed really strong. Like really, like of all the things you could have chosen, hurry is the devil. But the more I've reflected on that, and I've read the work of others who've done the same, I think he has a point. As a culture, we are busy people. We take pride in our busyness. Like, it gives us identity. Like pay attention. Like, what do a lot of people say when you ask them how they're doing? How you doing today? "Oh, I'm pretty good. Just really busy. Just, keep them busy. A lot of stuff going on." We have a lot of stuff to do. And it often feels like we don't have enough time in which to do it. Now, I want to say, just being busy, having a lot of stuff to do, that's not necessarily bad, okay? As long as it's the right stuff, the important stuff. You could argue that Jesus was busy, but he never seemed like he was in a hurry. He had margin. He had room for interruptions. Like, pay attention when you're reading the Gospels, how many of Jesus' interactions happened as interruptions when he was on the way to do something else, and how he responded. The problem comes when we have too much to do, and we buy into the belief, the illusion, that hurrying will buy us more time. We live in an age of speed and convenience. Fast food, fast internet, fast travel, on-demand entertainment, overnight shipping for a whole bunch of stuff. Like, thank you, Amazon Prime. Every day I open the door and see what Amazon Prime dropped off at my doorstep. Literally every day, yeah. And what's the implied promise behind all that speed? That it'll save us time, okay? But what are we doing with all that spare time? Like, do you feel like you have more time than you know what to do with? I mean, or do you feel like there's not enough hours in the day to accomplish your to-do list? For a lot of us, it's the second one. People used to believe, like a couple generations ago, that more advanced technology would result in more time for rest and leisure for humanity. But with the advent of things like smartphones and social media and video calls, we don't seem to be getting more rest, do we? In fact, studies have been done that we're actually sleeping less as a species than ever in history. In fact, I think a lot of us suffer from something called hurry sickness. This is a real psychological term. I did not make it up, believe it or not. It is when we feel like we have to constantly hurry. We speed through activities, or we rush from one to another to try to feel like we can fit everything in. I read about a few telltale signs, some red flags that might indicate whether you suffer from hurry sickness. You ready? We constantly try to speed up daily activities. Like picture this. You're pulling up to an intersection on a multi-lane road, and you count how many cars there are in each lane. Or you see, okay, there's a truck in that lane, so I'm going to get in the other lane because there's a better chance I'll be able to pull away faster. Anybody do that? Me too. I'm guilty. Guilty as charged. Or at the grocery store, we will pick out a checkout line, but then maybe we'll oh, that one's going faster. Let me switch over to that one. Or if you don't switch, you pay attention to where you would have been in that other line. And if you get done first, you win, right? Guilty. Another one is that we are constantly multitasking. Like maybe we feel like if we aren't doing more than one thing at a time, we are somehow wasting time. So we do 2, 3, 4, 5 things at the same time, and our brain power is divided between those 5 things. Or there's a benign interruption to what we're doing. And how do we respond to it? Anger, frustration. Sound familiar, parents? People with hurry sickness constantly believe they just don't have enough time for stuff, even important stuff. Like I would do that. I just don't have the time. And so we don't take time to rest or to just be, to be present with people, to be alone with our thoughts. Sometimes that's kind of scary. Or to be alone with God. And as a result, we live in a constant state of superficiality, surface level everything. And superficiality has been called the curse of our age. Surface level information. We read the headline, we don't read the article. You know what I'm saying? Surface level interests. And worst, surface level relationships. That's because hurry hinders our ability to to give and receive love, including God's love. And that's the real problem of a hurried life. A professor named Michael Zigarelli did a survey of over 20,000 Christians, and they identified busyness as the single biggest obstacle to having a better relationship with God. They're just too busy, or they think they are. But when we marginalize the influence of God in our lives, when we don't take time to be with Him, that means we're more susceptible to other influences in our world, which typically draw us further away from Him. In other words, people with hurry sickness generally aren't becoming more like Jesus. They're becoming less like Him because they don't take the time to be with Him and learn from Him, and they're listening to all these other voices instead. And sadly, I have to admit, I think I suffer from hurry sickness, at least sometimes. I think a lot of us do. And this week, as I have been prepping this sermon, I knew this was coming. God has brought to my attention so many ways that I do stuff like this. I mean, it always happens this way, that whatever I'm focused on, that's what God shows me. The other day, what was that? Thursday, I was on my way to a meeting, and I was getting on I-75, I was on the on-ramp, and just that was the moment that a group of 4 sandhill cranes decided to meander back and forth across the entrance lane. And there was this huge backup of traffic, and people are honking, people are revving their engines, trying to get these cranes out of their way. Everybody was getting mad because everybody's in a hurry. But you know who wasn't in a hurry? Those sandhill cranes. I can attest, they did not have hurry sickness. And I'm sitting there come on, stupid cranes. But they were going to move in their own time. And I also had other moments when I just wasn't sure, I could do everything I was supposed to do in the given time. There were moments when I found myself rushing around for no good reason. I was living a hurried life. The truth is, Jesus modeled something quite different for us than a hurried life. Again, I'm not saying He wasn't busy. He accomplished a lot in His roughly 3 years of ministry. But He was never hurried. His busyness never got in His way of giving or receiving love. It never got in His way of His relationships with other people or with God the Father. He understood the value of rest. He knew when to slow down and to just be alone with the Father for a while. And He taught His disciples to do the same. The Gospel according to Mark describes a little moment. This is kind of in between stories, better known stories in the life of Jesus, that demonstrates this. It's found in Mark 6, starting with verse 30. This is right after Jesus sent out His 12 core disciples, or apostles as they were later known, on a little mission to spread the word about Him. And they taught people, and they even healed people miraculously in His name. It must have been both exhilarating and exhausting. Here's what happened when they came back, Mark 6:30. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to Him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, He said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." There were so many people buzzing around, demanding their attention, that the apostles couldn't even sit down for a bite. That sounds pretty hurried to me. I can relate. What does Jesus tell them to do? He says, come on, come with me. Let's go on a boat. Let's go somewhere else. Let's rest and recharge. Now, they had a lot to do. There's always a lot to do. There always will be. But it must not come at the expense of your ability to give and receive love. Sometimes you have to just get away from the crowd and the noise and simply rest. And that's what they did. Verse 32. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. Unfortunately, in this story, the crowds followed them. So their rest didn't last very long this time. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Jesus still had compassion on the people, even though they followed him and interrupted his rest. And I think that's an example to us. Our capacity to love people well is so much greater when it comes from an unhurried heart. Jesus highly valued taking time to be alone with God. He did it all throughout his ministry, over and over again. He began his ministry with an extended time of solitude, 40 days, fasting in the wilderness. He ended his ministry with an extended time of prayer in the garden before his arrest. He made a habit of living out this famous verse from Psalm 46, "Be still and know that I am God." That's the way Jesus lived. And if we really want to grow to be more like Jesus as he's called us to do, I think we need to live that way too. In the words of Dallas Willard, we must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our lives. There are two specific spiritual practices I want to talk about in our remaining time that can help us do this. They both happen to start with the letter S. Sometimes preachers like things to start with the same letter. It makes it more memorable, I guess. And it works out this time. The first practice is slowing. Intentionally slowing down. This is choosing to put ourselves in situations where we have to wait. It's doing the opposite of what those of us with hurry sickness want to do. So like some examples of slowing, just possible examples, might be saying, you know what, this week I am going to deliberately drive in the slow lane on the freeway, I-75. I'm not saying like be a traffic hazard, but like don't treat it like a race. It's not a race. You don't win anything by getting to your destination a few minutes earlier. Or maybe you could say this week, whenever you find yourself with like a choice of different lines to wait in, like the store, grocery store, whatever, choose the longest one rather than the shortest one. Some of you are like, that is crazy talk. I know. Again, it's not a race. It's okay to wait for a little while. And if you feel yourself getting like restless, it's a great opportunity to take a deep breath and pray, God, help me to be patient. Help me to be unhurried. And open my eyes to opportunities around me to do your will, to share your love. Other ways we might practice slowing. Again, this is not a complete list, but other ideas, not wearing a watch for a week or turning off your phone for a certain time frame every day. Maybe just silencing notifications. At meals, take your time to savor your food, like actually chew it before you swallow it. Or if you're a habitual multitasker, focus on trying to do just one thing at a time. Like you're not going to try to watch TV and be on your phone and your computer and eat dinner and talk to your family all at the same time. Slow down. I mean, since I've been doing this, I've noticed how many times we have multiple screens at the same time. And we wonder why we feel hurried. Now, I recognize that not all of those things are possible for everyone based on your job situation, your season of life. Some of you are like, if I drove in the slow lane, I would never get to work, whatever. The idea is not to try to do all of them. But I do encourage you to choose a way to intentionally slow down or put yourself in a situation where you have to wait this week. Could be something I've said, something else you can think of, a way to combat hurry sickness. Doing this helps us learn to be patient. It helps us reduce anxiety. Some of you might be like, it'll make me more anxious. It might at first, until you learn that actually the world did not fall apart when I didn't rush around. It reminds us to focus on what really matters, so we'll be able to better give and receive love. In other words, it helps us to be more like Jesus. Practice slowing. The other practice that combats hurry sickness and starts with an S is solitude. This is what Jesus practiced habitually throughout his ministry. He took time to get away, to be by himself, to think and pray. And if Jesus, like the Son of God, the Messiah, Jesus, frequently needed time for solitude, I think you and I might want to consider it too, right? Our world is noisy, arguably even noisier than it was back then. There are a lot of voices trying to influence us. Not all of those are bad voices, just like not all of the activities that we do are bad things to do. But sometimes we need to turn off the noise so that we can focus on God's voice. Solitude is a way we can escape the overwhelming and sometimes toxic influences of the world around us. And in our modern context, I think solitude not only includes physically getting away from other people for a period of time, but also turning off all those devices with their constant notifications and distractions, so we can hear God's voice more clearly. It's putting into practice this principle from the book of Romans. Listen to what Paul writes. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. God wants to transform us into new people. We are new creations. And he wants to do that by his Spirit by changing the way we think. So let's think differently. Take time to think. Let's spend time alone with God so that he can teach us his good, pleasing, and perfect will. The practice of solitude is closely connected to other practices like prayer and Bible reading. And we're going to talk more about those things in future weeks. But solitude isn't so much about what we do. It's more about what we don't do. It's primarily about not doing something. Life is busy. And yeah, it is true that we're supposed to learn to pray continually, just throughout our day, whatever we're doing. We're supposed to worship and give thanks to God in all kinds of circumstances. But in the practice of solitude, we stop all that other activity and focus our full attention on God. Now, when I talk about solitude, I don't know what you picture. Like maybe you picture Superman's Fortress of Solitude. That may just be me, I don't know. Or like solitary confinement, like that's solitude. Maybe you picture going like to a cabin on some mountaintop or somewhere else in nature just to be alone with God. And the practice of solitude can look like that. In fact, I think it's a really good thing to do. If you have the chance to take like 24 or 48 hours once or twice a year and go someplace beautiful, preferably without internet or other distractions, and pray and think and journal, be alone with God. It can be a very refreshing, very empowering experience. There are many campgrounds and retreat centers that specialize in this sort of thing. I've had the chance to do things like this several times myself, and I found it to be a very richly rewarding experience. So, like if you're thinking about going on some kind of little retreat like that, if you have the chance to do it, 100% recommend it, okay? But the practice of solitude does not have to look like that. In fact, I think we can practice a form of solitude every day. Sometimes people call it a daily quiet time. And for many centuries, Christians have found it to be very helpful in making their faith an everyday thing. The idea is to set aside some time at the same time every day to focus on God. A lot of people do it either first thing in the morning or in the evening right before bed, like the advanced disciples of Jesus do both morning and evening. It might be especially helpful. In the morning, like you pray for the coming day, you pray over everything that's on your plate. And in the evening, like you can review the day with God. Like, Lord, where did I see you working? Where did I fall short? How can I grow? Now, some people might spend half an hour, even an hour in their quiet time. I've known some people who do it even longer. It doesn't have to be that long. Even like 5 minutes can make a big difference in your awareness of God's presence in your day, especially if it's your first time. You've never really done a thing like this before. But for it to truly be a practice of solitude, you need to eliminate as many distractions as you can. For some of this means eliminating your kids. Not really like that. But like, seriously, try to get away. And I'm saying this is probably not something you should try to do with the TV on in the background. Like even music, like for me, some people find music helpful, but even Christian music, I find it distracting. Like I'm thinking about that instead of thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing. Bible reading is often a really important part of quiet time, but as much as I love the convenience of Bible apps on smartphones, I do not recommend it for quiet time. Use a paper Bible if you can. Paper Bibles don't have notifications. They don't have other apps. The thing with a smartphone is it's very easy to become distracted. Like you may need to be creative in how to make quiet time happen, depending on your living situation. If you live with young kids, it can be challenging to figure out when and where to do this. For years, one of the places I have had my quiet time has been in the shower, because in theory, my kids will leave me alone there. In theory, right? So eliminate distractions in order to focus on God. As best you can, try to slow your breathing, quiet your heart, and pray for your day. Like, how can God grow you through your experiences that day? Like, you might include other practices like Bible reading or keeping a journal of how God has answered your prayer. And now, for some of you, as I have talked today for like the last 10 minutes or so about the practices of slowing and solitude, you may have been like, this is ridiculous. Like, you just do not understand my life. I have so much to do. I have so many hats to wear. That's why I hurry. Like, sure, it would be nice to intentionally slow down or to have a daily quiet time with God, but Aaron, it's just not going to happen. And if that's you, I get it. I understand. I can feel that way too. And I am married to a person that has a really hard time slowing down. And she said I could share that with you today. But may I suggest that if that's your reaction, if you're pushing back on this hard, you're the one who needs this the most. You need to practice slowing and solitude. You don't have to be in a hurry. So for all of us here today, I challenge you to choose at least one, but no more than maybe like 3 practices of slowing or solitude to try this week. Something you're not already doing, okay? Like some of you may be like, I've had a daily quiet time for 30 years. Great, congratulations. Find ways to challenge yourself, like expand it or enhance it in some way. Now, what you choose to do, it doesn't necessarily have to be on this list, but it's something within this category. You guys are smart, you're creative, you can come up with something that would qualify. It's just something you cannot do or do differently to slow down or quiet your mind, to be still and know that He is God. And if you do this, I want to hear about it. Like, I want to hear if this makes a difference for you, if it helps you to be just a little bit more like Jesus this week. So choose what you're going to do and then let me know how it goes. Or let's be honest, some of you are much more likely to tell Jen about it. That's okay. You can tell her. She'll just tell me anyway. So that's fine. That's fine. I heard a story this week about a dog from Tacoma, Washington, a basset hound named Tattoo. But Tattoo was not intending to go on an evening run. But when his owner shut his leash in a car door and took off for a drive, Tattoo had no choice. A police officer on a motorcycle happened to see the situation and pulled the car over, but not before Tattoo had been forced to try to keep up with the car going 20 to 30 miles per hour and had rolled over several times, being dragged behind the vehicle. Now, Tattoo's just fine. He made it. He's okay. Although they say he has not asked to go out for an evening walk in quite some time. Too many of us are too much like Tattoo. We're pulled in different directions. We're dragged from one task to another, and we struggle to keep up. But let's train for another way of life, an unhurried life, like the one modeled by Jesus. We must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our lives.